Hello everyone, in today's video I'm going to be reviewing Taxi Driver from 1976. But before I delve into my own personal opinion on Taxi Driver, here's my little Robert De Niro impression for you guys of one of the greatest movie lines in the history of cinema. You talking to me? You talking to me? You talking to me? Who the hell are you talking to? I'm the only one here. Who the fuck do you think you're talking to? Oh yeah? No one did that scene better than Robert De Niro himself. I'm no Robert De Niro. I'm never going to win any Academy Awards. But I tried, did my best. So anyway, here's my thoughts and opinions about Taxi Driver. Taxi Driver is a crime drama that was made by Bill Phillips Production that was distributed by Columbia when the film was released. The film was released on February 8th, 1976. The film grossed $28.4 million at the box office, and it was nominated for 4 Academy Awards. It was directed by Martin Scorsese, who had prior to this directed Mean Streets, and would go on to direct films like Raging Bull, The King of Comedy, Last Temptation of Christ, and Goodfellas. It was produced by Julia and Michael Phillips. It was written by Paul Schrader, who did a lot of horror movies and also wrote other Scorsese films. The movie stars Robert De Niro, Jodie Foster, Harvey Keitel, Sybil Shepherd, Albert Brooks, and Peter Boyle. Taxi Driver is about Travis Bickle, who is a Vietnam veteran who suffers from insomnia. He has mental health problems and has depression. He goes around working late nights as a taxi driver, and he's very horrified and disgusted with what he sees. Crimes, gangs, violence, and child prostitution. Travis Bickle is out of touch and lost with reality and does not blend in and fit in with society. He meets a girl named Betsy, but unfortunately, after one bad date, the relationship does not go anywhere. Travis wants to become a hero, but unfortunately, he wants to do it in a very bad and violent way. Travis wants to save Iris, a 12-year-old prostitute, from living a lifestyle where she's selling her soul and being used for sex, and that no 12-year-old should live like. Before I delve into my personal thoughts and themes on the movie Taxi Driver, I want to give a little personal background when I first saw Taxi Driver. The first time I saw Taxi Driver was in 2010. I was 16 years old, a junior in high school. And this was post 2000, heading to early 2010s, when this was the era of in the skyrocketing of social medias, and how people were so attracted to and the reality shows of the Jersey Shore, keeping up with the Kardashians and Justin Bieber's music. And people were also attracted to the idea how these reality shows, people were being rich and famous and successful for not being famous and having no talent whatsoever. But unfortunately, for me as a teenager, I hated and still hate reality shows. I found nothing but stupid, boring, no originality, and nothing interesting. And to this day, I still do not give two shits about keeping up with the Kardashians. Kim Kardashian got famous online for making a sex tape. Big deal whatsoever. Still no talent there. I'm not satisfied or that amazed. In high school, people would not stop talking about last week's episode of Jersey Shore. I couldn't stop thinking about Taxi Driver. I didn't really have anyone around to talk about Taxi Driver with. Back when I was a teenager in high school, characters like Travis Bickle, Rorschach from Watchmen, and The Punisher, as you see I'm wearing. For some reason, when I was a teenager, I was very fascinated with anti-heroes, and it's really hard to describe on why. Even to this day, I still have a fascination with anti-heroes. Especially Taxi Driver is one of those movies that I felt so connected to that I can't even describe. Even to this day as an adult, when I go back to watch Taxi Driver, I still feel connected to it in a very deeper level. Taxi Driver is one of my favorite movies of all time. What I really love about Taxi Driver is that it has this documented, neo-realistic feel, as if you were watching a documentary on showing about how New York City's high crime rates were so high back in the 1970s that New York was not a place to live in back in the 1970s. One thing I can agree with moviegoers is that this is probably one of the greatest films of all time. This is probably Martin Scorsese's masterpieces, or one of his masterpieces, that being either Goodfellas, Raging Bull, but a lot of moviegoers have their own personal opinion, what they think is the best Martin Scorsese film. Also, Robert De Niro's performance as Travis is like so iconic. That's probably like my favorite personal Robert De Niro role ever. Robert De Niro's performance as Travis Bickle is so like great and fantastic that he's weird, disturbing, he's awkward, he isolates himself from the world, feeling out of touch with reality, not knowing where to fit into society. He's trying to find a purpose and meaning in life, but unfortunately, trying to find his purpose and meaning like goes too far in extreme, thinking that violence is the answer to solving crime and also to clean up the streets of New York. Travis Bickle's the kind of character that you either sympathize with, empathy, or you either like don't sympathize with him. But there's really like no like answer to that. It's really like up to the viewers and audience to decide whether or not you really feel for this character or not. For me personally, I find Travis Bickle very fascinating to some degree. There are moments where he's sympathetic and moments where he's a little bit weird, crazy, and awkward and disturbing at times. People may think I'm crazy for saying this, but I actually do like the character to a certain degree. As I mentioned before, Travis does have his flaws at times. Like, for instance, when he takes Betsy to the porn theater on their second date, lesson learned, do not take a girl to a porn theater on a date. And also, that just really shows how he's really out of touch with reality, not knowing anything about music, movies, politics, etc. This was Travis' way of showing Betsy how, like, the way he saw the world and how he wanted to bring her into his own world. But if Travis was smart enough, Betsy could have saved Travis from getting out of this world. A better life with her. She could have been a savior for Travis. Taxi Driver is a symbolic and has a lot of metaphors in this movie. After the bad date, we see how Travis is calling Betsy, trying to fix the relationship, and then eventually we see how the camera like points away into an empty hallway, and then he hangs up the phone, and Travis walks down the empty hallway. That is just showing like how that this relationship, that Travis was not meant to have a love life in his life, and that relationship was not meant to be fixed or meant to go anywhere. Being a teenager watching this film, it never occurred to me how, like, when you look at the Alka-Seltzer, it's basically a metaphor for showing how, like, that's a sign, a symbol, how, like, Travis is not very well, he's very sick, and that he has a mental problem. Or how when you look at his apartment, the messy apartment, the environment, and all the sugar that he's eating and drinking is not good for his health. Travis has an insomnia that shows how it's making him more, like, delusional and crazy, which is something I can relate to because I've had insomnia in the past and it's not fun. When we see Travis drive his taxi cab late at night during the scary witching hours, it's very horrifying and disturbing seeing what Travis like witnesses at night, and this is what motivates Travis to want to be a hero. He begins like questioning himself like through his facial expression. How come nobody has not like cleaned up these streets of New York despite all these like illegal stuff going on, and yet the cops don't do anything about it? Each Travis wanted to have a purpose and meaning in life, thinking that violence and killing is going to solve the problem and the answers, but unfortunately, that's not really the case, though, to fixing crime. Examples when he's watching television, for instance. One that stands out is when he's watching an interview with Senator Palantine, who is a politician candidate running for president. We see the look on Travis's face, the look of disgust, annoyed, mad about how, like, politicians are nothing but puppets and corrupt people that don't really care about society. And they don't do anything to fix the system. Liars. Which unfortunately you can relate to what happened recently in the last couple of years during the Trump years when he was president. Another example is when we see Travis watching this soap opera on television. He breaks the TV and we see how that's basically a metaphor that he's having a breakdown, he's losing it, he's collapsing. He has two cameos in the film. His first cameo when we see him looking at Betsy when she's walking into her job. His second cameo, and surprisingly his acting in this film is not too bad. He's playing like a crazy psychotic character who tells Travis that he's going to kill his wife because she's being unfaithful and cheating on him. This is a like, what would you do in this kind of situation if someone told you that? Would you have reported this guy? Or would you just like went about your own business but feeling guilt for the rest of your life if he really was about to kill his wife? But then the other question is, was he being serious or was he just some other like random crazy character who just came out of nowhere and to sit in Travis's cab to tell him this. Again, an unknown answer. The training scenes is kind of like similar how like when Travis was in like the Vietnam War, how like before like when soldiers go out to war, they're being trained physically and mentally what's to come. In a way, Travis is training himself what's to come in a war zone out in New York City. People have not seen Taxi Driver, they know the famous line, "You talking to me?" That line has been like parodied and referenced in like other movies to death, or other people out there just quote that film to death. Like I remember the first time I ever heard that quote was in the Rocky and Bullwinkle with Robert De Niro in 1999, which unfortunately that was a bad film. That was my intro to knowing the famous line, "You talking to me?" And as I mentioned before, it's been parodied to death, like SCTV, Animaniacs. There are like countless like references to that line for people who have not seen it, but yet they know that line, just like that. Performance as sport. He's such a big dirtbag and a piece of shit pedophile. The way he like treats and the way he talks about Iris, it's like she's 12 years old, you douchebag. I mean, literally, he's just a sick piece of shit that deserved to die. Assassination attempt when Travis almost shot Senator Palantine. That scene is relatable, similar to what goes on with today's society with like the gun shootouts, like the one that happened in like Las Vegas in 2017, or the school shootouts. Even relatable to the past when you had like the assassinations of like President John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr., and John F. Kennedy's brother RFK. And John Hinckley Jr. was inspired from this film when he shot President Reagan to impress Jodie Foster. Character Iris is a very likable and sympathetic character. It's really sad and disturbing to see like how like this poor innocent 12-year-old girl is living this like lifestyle, prostitution, selling her soul to a bunch of like low-life garbage piece of shits. And this is like the moment where I really like feel like get the sense of like where I kind of like start to like Travis, seeing how like Travis is being like a father concerned person, like trying to help Iris get out of this lifestyle because no 12-year-old deserves this lifestyle. Most 12-year-olds deserve to be at home with their parents, where they're going to school and hang out with friends, not being prostitutes. Albert Brooks, as you all know, did the voice of Marlin in Finding Nemo. It amazes me how like it's a little odd and strange seeing him do like a serious role because I'm used to seeing him do a lot of comedy. And he's actually really not that bad in this movie. I mean, he's kind of like, I mean, he's not like funny like where he's being comedic. He has like his like humorous moments at times in the movie. The Helga Seltzer scene, as a teenager watching this, it never really occurred to me. I never really gave it much of a thought about how like the way this movie ended. I just always assumed like this was the actual ending, but it never really occurred to me how like people have interpreted the ending in their own like point of views, like on whether or not did Travis die or like did this really happen, was all made up in his head. I feel like it's one of those like endings where there's like no particular like answer. It's up for like our point of views and our decision on whether or not did this really happen, did Travis die, or did he survive. In my opinion, I would say it definitely happened for sure, and I feel like they give like subtle hints that he either survived or he did not survive, but it's really up to our decisions on how we interpret the ending. It's like whether it did or did not happen. It's so like gore and violently brutal, but yet it's like you root for Travis to kill like these low life scum piece of garbages to save Iris's life. And as I said before, this is where I really like start to like really like Travis to a certain degree. Despite how like brutal and violent he becomes trying to save Iris's life. Themes and the controversy of Taxi Driver. Taxi Driver is a film that has aged very well the last 40 plus years, and it's something that movie audiences and moviegoers will continue to talk about till the end of time. Always continue to enjoy watching over and over again, no matter how many times I've seen the film. And to me, it keeps getting better and better every time I watch this movie. To my facts about Taxi Driver, I just thought I wanted to show you my DVD copy I have of the movie. I have it on Blu-ray, but unfortunately it's packed up somewhere, one of the boxes in one of the U-Haul places. My facts on Taxi Driver. During the making of this film, Robert De Niro and Jodie Foster would rehearse their scenes together. De Niro was preparing for the role of Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver. He worked 15 hours a week for a month in order to study being a taxi cab driver. And he also studied mental illness. 12 years old during the making of this film, she could not do the explicit scene. So her older sister Connie was a double for her. Her had a reputation and won an Oscar for Godfather Part 2. He was hardly recognized when he was studying to be a cab driver for the character of Travis Bickle, and got recognized only a few times, then a lot. Paul Schrader said that Taxi Driver was based on some of his experiences, like being from loneliness, isolation, going through divorce, being rejected by women. And he said that he used to hang around porn theaters when he was depressed. Talking to Me was not in the script and was improvised by Robert De Niro. Robert De Niro said he was inspired from a scene with Marlon Brando in a movie called Reflection of the Golden Eye from 1967. During the making of this movie, there was a garbage strike. All that garbage and filth you see on the street was actually real. That he wrote the part for Travis Bickle for Jeff Bridges, but he ended up turning it down. It took longer than expected because of technical problems. Originally, the character Sport was going to be written as a black man. Martin Scorsese ended up changing it because Travis shot one man that was black, and he was worried about what if audiences would think that Travis Bickle was a racist. Hoffman turned down the role of Travis Bickle because he thought that Martin Scorsese's script was crazy. He has since then said in later years that he regrets turning it down. Robert De Niro's real-life wife, Diane Abbott, was the concession woman at the porn theater. I had a hard time remembering her lines during the coffee and pie scene, and this annoyed Robert De Niro. The character of Iris from Martin Scorsese appears in the film as Iris's friend. The coffee pie scene, Travis Bickle orders apple pie with melted cheese. This is what Ed Gein, the serial killer, requested at the time when he was finally caught by the police. Sybil Shepherd is the part of Betsy because of her lower bottom being a sex appeal. But during the making of the film, her and Martin Scorsese had a difficult relationship. Do escort a taxi driver. But after when he saw the scene of Travis pouring schnapps on his bread, he changed his mind and wanted to make escort a taxi driver. Actor for the part when Travis is being told by some crazy nutjob that he was going to kill his wife. But unfortunately, the actor got sick. Instead of waiting for the actor, Martin Scorsese said he'll do the part. Scorsese had to sit in a blanket in the taxi cab in the back seat when they shot his second cameo. It was shot during the summertime. It was very, very hot, but that added to the charm and the atmosphere to the film. The part to Iris, over 250 actresses auditioned for the role. He was offered to direct the film, but he turned it down and has since then regretted that decision. Iris, Jodie Foster had to seek counseling, and Jodie Foster learned improvising lines from Robert De Niro during the making of this movie. The part of Travis Bickle because he had so many injuries that he sustained during the making of The Farmer. Midwestern dialects for the voice of Travis Bickle's flat voice. The part of Iris, but turned it down because of her mother, Tippity Hepburn. The restaurants where you see the taxi drivers eat at was actually a real location where, back in the old days, that's where taxi cab drivers would eat at restaurants. But unfortunately, in today's society, those buildings and restaurants are demolished and no longer there and are something else today. Talking to Me is ranked number 10 by American Film Institute as greatest movie lines ever. Bickle, but it's unknown if he liked the script or not. The whole production of the movie. Supposed to have a cameo as a taxi cab passenger, but unfortunately the part was cut because the film was considered too long for that. Voted 25 most dangerous movies, and Mia Farrow was considered for the role of Betsy, but Martin Scorsese turned her down. Turned down Betsy. 2005, they were originally going to make a video game for Taxi Driver, but unfortunately, the video game idea ended up being canceled. Gene Siskel gave this film a thumbs down, and yet Roger Ebert puts this as one of his greatest films of all time. Institute's ranked this number 52 greatest films of all time ever made. It got booed at the Cannes Film Festival. It took 42 days to shoot this movie. Sigourney Weaver turned down Betsy, the role of Iris, but she turned it down. This has included 1001 movies to see before you die. Burt Reynolds said that he turned down Taxi Driver and said that he regretted that. This picture did not win an Academy Award. Taxi Driver was considered, but unfortunately, Martin Scorsese said the script and the idea was just not good enough. So the idea for a sequel never happened. Hope you liked and enjoyed it. Before I end the video, I wanted to say that like a few months ago, like back in like maybe, I'm not sure like when exactly, I did a review of Taxi Driver on my friend's channel called Cantal1408. I still haven't figured out how to leave links in the description, but I'll just like point it out and have it spelled out in front of the camera, so that way you can just Google it. Look up Cantal1408 Taxi Driver review. That's my friend Christian. Subscribe to his channel. He's got awesome stuff to present on his channel. Like the video, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to get my latest updates on my channel. Thanks. Goodbye. See you next time.